Yes, you read that title right. Today, I'm going to be ranking every single 2023 movie I saw last year, all 95 of them. Yes, I know it would have been smoother and cooler if it was 100, but goddammit, 95 is a lot, and this video has already been delayed numerous times for a variety of reasons, so you're getting 95, and you're gonna like it. Anyways, yes, I saw a lot of movies in 2023. If it wasn't apparent from my channel, I love talking about movies. I'm also really bad at reviewing movies for a channel where that's its primary goal. Hopefully, that'll change this year, but given my track record, we'll have to wait and see. Now, this doesn't mean I'm going to be ranking every single movie I saw last year, just the ones that released in 2023. The criteria for this list is simply, if it got distribution, whether that be in theaters or on streaming in 2023, and I saw it, it counts for this list. It'll go in ascending order from worst to best. While I generally try to avoid movies I've heard aren't good, there's just some that disappoint you that you weren't expecting, and then there's stuff like Rebel Moon. And before you yell at me, no, this is not a ranking of the best movies of the year. This is a ranking of what I would consider to be my favorite movies of the year. I think making best of lists for things like movies is pretty pointless since art is subjective, so I'd rather talk about what I consider to be my favorite movies of the year. But probably the question you all may be asking is, why the am I ranking every single movie I saw last year that released? Well, it just came down to there were simply too many amazing or even just plain good movies last year, and I felt like I had something to say about all of them, even the films I didn't like. So, in traditional me fashion, I decided to make myself do even more work than I should do and just rank every single movie. Sadly, as a lot of you will probably come to realize, there's going to be some films that I wasn't able to get to, like May December, Tetris, and Ghosted. It's not that I didn't want to see any of these movies. Well, okay, maybe Ghosted. It's just that there were so many movies and shows released this past year that I tried to keep up with, and I just wasn't able to. Despite the strikes causing delays in several movies, Hollywood still pumped out an insane amount of high-quality films this year. I know some of you are saying, but it's March now, you've had time to watch more. And yes, you're not wrong. But the fact of the matter is that there's so much shit going on in my life and movies already releasing this year that I want to see that I just decided to cap the list off at 95. And can I just say, to those of you that say movies aren't as good as they once were, or there's just no good movies out, I call bull and malarkey. There were, in fact, many good movies released last year, and hopefully this list will bring to light many films that you decide to skip out on for whatever reason, or maybe have never even heard of. 2024 has some extremely good competition to go up against, and if the movies that have already been released are any indication, I don't think it stands a chance against 2023, except for Dune Part 2. That film is a masterpiece and easily crushes most films on this list. But let's not delay this any longer. This is easily going to be my longest video ever, so strap yourselves in, have those thumbs ready to comment why my tastes are so bad, and let's get started. Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, is easily my least favorite Zack Snyder movie and my least favorite movie of the year. I've talked about him and his filmography multiple times on this channel and on my podcast Geek Speak, which you should totally subscribe to if you haven't already, so I'll keep thoughts about him brief. I've always been so conflicted on Snyder as a filmmaker. While he seems like a pretty cool dude and someone I genuinely have a lot of admiration for as a filmmaker when it comes to crafting amazing spectacle and sights, I don't think he's the kind of filmmaker that's best at crafting narratives that require great dramatic depth and proper character building, which is the exact problem with Rebel Moon. Now yes, this is the PG-13 version of his original vision, and there's most definitely scenes missing from this version, but even with those scenes added in, I don't think that's going to fix the film's problems. Everything from the story, to the paper-thin characters, I struggle to even call them characters, to the bland and lifeless world building, to the visual aesthetic of the film, which looks like the film was dipped in cat piss and desaturated even further, it all just doesn't work. Snyder is the kind of filmmaker that works best when there's a simple story that doesn't require much depth to explore. Films like 300 and Army of the Dead work well, yes, I've come around on Army of the Dead, because they're not trying to be films they're not. Hell, Even his version of Justice League leaves behind all the deep, thought-provoking questions of Man of Steel and BVS in favor of a much simpler, albeit longer, story. But now with Rebel Moon, he's trying again to tap back into a side of himself as a filmmaker that I honestly don't think he's that good at. Snyder making a giant R-rated space epic should have been a really easy win, but instead it's just an amalgamation of dozens of sci-fi and fantasy films and tropes we've seen done to death without adding anything of its own. I really wanted to like this, but it just doesn't work. It's a broken film, broken even further by the PG-13 restriction, and I honestly don't want to watch part 2 after watching this one. Yeah, it was bound to end up pretty low on this list. I won't spend too much time on it since I've already made a review of it, but The Flash is easily one of my least favorite movies from the DCEU. Taking all the wrong lessons from the past mistakes of the DCEU and what films like Spider-Man No Way Home did, this very much feels like a film made by corporate overlords trying to make the most satisfying product, and ending up with a soulless husk that sort of resembles a movie instead. While it has its moments, The Flash is just a mess from beginning to end. I can see there's some kind of effort to salvage this and make it a true movie, but when you get to that third act, it all falls apart. If you want to hear more of my thoughts, then go check out my review. Hopefully, James Gunn does a better job with DC than DC did. This one honestly hurts for me to put so low. Wish, on paper, should have been an easy win for Disney, but, like The Flash, it feels like it was created by corporate heads trying to make the most audience-friendly, risk-free film and ended up creating a movie that says and does nothing. By the end, I had completely forgotten just about everything from the film. None of the characters made an impression, the songs were both not memorable and just plain didn't fit the genre of the film it was, the story was too simple with themes that I can't even recall what it was trying to say, and an animation style that, while on paper could have been really cool, ends up feeling half-assed because they didn't go all the way with it. I feel bad for dogging on this film because everyone from the cast to the filmmakers and animators have all done really great stuff in the past, but this should be a good call to Disney on why they need to actually take risks instead of trying to play it safe. Will they listen? I'm gonna guess that's a no. Man, I feel bad for James Wan. Aquaman The Lost Kingdom is just meh? I don't know, it's just one of those films that I don't have any real strong feelings one way or the other about it. I can tell James Wan is trying, his direction and style is all over this, the action scenes still being fantastic, but the narrative and poor character work just do this movie no favors. I love the first Aquaman, faults and all, but this time around it strangely feels like they were playing it too safe. I don't know if that was because of Warner Brothers interference or what, but it just didn't have the same level of pizzazz the first film had. I love Jason Momoa as his character. I love the life and energy James Wan brought to DC with these films, but because the narrative just doesn't give us much of anything, it doesn't leave any kind of impression at all. I didn't hate it, but I certainly didn't love it either. What a whimper of a film to end the DCEU on. Oh boy, I'm gonna get so much hate for this one. The Super Mario Bros. Movie is fine. All in all, it's just another Illumination movie. While they're capable of making some pretty good stuff, they just feel so contempt at playing it way too safe most of the time, and this is, in my opinion, their crowning achievement in that. It almost feels like they knew that no matter what, this was going to be a huge hit, and they weirdly felt like they didn't have to put in much effort at all. Not on the animation side, the animation is goddamn incredible. For all their film's faults, their animation is still some of the best in the business. It perfectly captures the look and feel of the games while still being able to retain that cartoony slapstick feeling Illumination is known for. The biggest fault is this film's writing, and before you start writing about how Mario doesn't need a good story, yes, in the games. But this is not a game. This is a movie where story is kind of important in a lot of ways to the medium. But a simple story can be enhanced by things like good characters and or good humor and action, and this film barely has any of that. Even having played multiple Mario games, I barely have any clue who any of these characters are outside of things like Luigi equals scared and Peach equals strong female character. This was Illumination's chance to add something to the Mario mythos that really can't ever be added given the nature of the games, and they just fled in the opposite direction. Even the humor doesn't work. So many jokes just feel like an afterthought, or moments are set up to seem like they're a joke, and then no punchline is delivered. While the cast is overall pretty good, they're just given no good material to work with, and that just makes the lack of humor hurt even more. The biggest revelation for me was seeing this opening weekend in a packed theater full of kids laughing at every single thing that happened, then seeing it again a week or so later completely alone in a theater with no screaming children laughing at every single thing that was happening. Watch it again by yourself and tell me if you think this is actually that funny. But I can at least say the action is ultimately what saved this for me. It's fast, fluid, and frenetic, and not in a jingle keys in front of a baby sort of way, but in an actual engaging and fun manner. The Mario Kart sequence is probably my favorite from the movie, and I wish the film had more stuff like that. All in all, the Super Mario Bros. Movie is just another Illumination movie, and I'll forget it as soon as the next Minions movie is announced. This is another one that hurts to put this low. The Last Voyage of the Demeter is one of those films that has such an awesome concept that hurts even more when you see how mediocre it is. This was a total letdown, and I'm still saddened by it today. While the cast is fantastic, the pacing and over-reliance on jump scares completely kills any and all tension, and just results in what should have been one of the coolest vampire movies turning into just another vampire movie. While there's certainly good things to find about this movie, it just didn't work for me. Oh boy, I can already smell those torches getting lit. But was afraid. I still don't know what the f*** I watched to this day. While I've recently come around to Ari Aster's previous films, Hereditary and Midsommar, from the first trailer of this, I already knew this was probably not going to be a film for me. I genuinely don't know what the f*** this movie was going for. While I can tell on a technical and acting side it's fantastic, from a narrative standpoint, I don't know what the f*** that was. The tone was all over the map, not in an intentional way, but in a very confused manner. The lack of any sense of reality makes it incredibly hard to get invested in our main character and even know what's real or not. While that may have been the intention, it just made for a much more frustrating and exhausting experience. If I'm constantly asking why at every creative choice that's made so I can maybe have some kind of understanding so I can enjoy what I'm seeing, either I'm too dumb to get it or the intention was not executed well. But I've heard from several people I know that they either loved this movie or hated it. Some consider it the best comedy of the year, and others drowned their eyes in bleach afterward. It's the kind of film that frustrated me the more and more it went on, and by the end of its exhausting 3-hour runtime, I bolted out of the theater. The pacing was all over the map, the tone was incredibly inconsistent. While it may have been impressive on a technical and acting scale, I genuinely don't know what Ari Aster was going for. If you enjoyed it, then more power to you. This is just simply not a movie for me. This is another example of a movie with an awesome premise and just poor execution. What should have been an awesome sci-fi thriller ended up being a fairly generic and underwhelming experience. Any scenes of suspense didn't work well, the pacing was very inconsistent, the action was fine, but what ultimately made the film falter for me was the emotional core. While the two leads of this film are fantastic, with a good template laid out for a good emotional story, it doesn't work because of the language barrier they put in place for some reason. This is one of those creative choices that at first could work, but for the narrative they're going for, it ultimately doesn't do it any justice. It's very similar to the Tom Hanks movie News of the World, where they have a similar emotional core, but the language barrier prevents it from actually working. The reason why stories like The Last of Us work so well is because of the communication the two characters are able to have with one another. Hell, even in Logan, his daughter at first only speaks in Spanish, but then Mangold realized that the emotions are able to work better when they're able to effectively communicate with each other in the same language. I don't know if that's just me, but that's ultimately why 65 didn't work for me. An awesome premise with two great leads that ultimately goes to waste due to some strange creative choices. You know, the more I write about some of these movies, the more I wonder if I do just have bad taste in movies. Anyway, Napoleon wasn't that good. Now, before the murder commences, I just want to say I love Ridley Scott and so many of his movies that he's made. While there's still a good amount I need to see, even I can't deny the dude has an insane amount of talent, and I'll always go see his movies when they come out. And Napoleon seemed like it was going to be another great film from him. What it ended up being was a film that I don't even know if it knew what it was about. Apparently this film got butchered in the edit and there's supposed to be an over 3-hour version releasing on Apple sometime in the future, so I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of my complaints get fixed in that version. But as the film is now, it's fine. While the performances are good and the grand epic scale of it genuinely amazed me, there was just no good hook. I feel like I didn't learn much about Napoleon as a person, or other people like his wife, or really why he would do what he would do. It just felt like a standard biopic of here's this famous person's famous events, and nothing more. While there are certainly some fantastic things about this film, genuinely, those battle scenes are a sight to behold, and some of the best I've seen in years. Everything in between is so boring and uninteresting that I felt like I was back in high school history class. While Ridley Scott definitely still has the sauce, this just wasn't the film for me. Hopefully, the extended cut can fix a lot of these issues for me. I'm gonna be honest, I kind of forgot this came out last year. Operation Fortune should have been an easy win for Guy Ritchie, and yet, it's just okay? I don't know if it was a script thing, or if he just didn't have it in him for this, but at the end of the day, this became just another spy movie. A spy movie, mind you, that has a terrific cast that I honestly wouldn't have thought of for a spy movie, but most of them aren't given much and the action scenes are just okay, which is bizarre for me to say about a Guy Ritchie movie, and the plot is just there? Honestly, it's hard for me to really comment on the story given it's been almost a goddamn year since I've seen it and it left so little of an impression on me, but I will say, the cast really does save this movie for me. Ritchie clearly knew what he was doing and utilized everyone brilliantly. Hugh Grant and Josh Hartnett are the easy standouts, and all of their scenes together make this an easy recommendation. While it doesn't do much to reinvent the spy genre, it gets enough right to make me say to check this one out. While it's nice to see Eddie Murphy doing more movies again, it still feels like the writers of his movies don't know how to utilize him to his full potential. Candy Cane Lane is one of those Christmas movies that could be pretty forgettable, but with a pretty good sense of humor and a cast that knows how to bounce off each other well, it gets just enough right to make this a potential Christmas watch every season. I don't know, sometimes I don't have a whole lot to say, I guess. It looks fine. David Alan Grier is Santa? That's neat. I don't know, moving on. Another film that disappoints me to put this low. Next Goal Wins should have been another easy win for Taika Waititi, and instead just feels like a confused mess from someone that didn't have the clearest vision for what he wanted this film to be. When it finds that right balance of over-the-top comedy with a grounded emotional center, that's when this film works, very similar to Jojo Rabbit. When it does some jokes that just go on and on and on that aren't that funny, like Thor Love and Thunder, that's when it doesn't work. Don't get me wrong, I don't think this is a bad movie. The cast is great, it's a fun play on the inspirational Coach sports movie, and there's a decent amount of jokes and emotions that work, but it's all out of whack. Taika seemed to be conflicted when making this on whether he wanted to lean more serious like with Jojo Rabbit, or more zany like with Love and Thunder. So he tried to walk both lines, and it just led to a confused film. While I certainly don't think it's bad, I don't think it's his best film, but it certainly isn't his worst either. This was a strange movie to say the least. If you want to talk about a tonal mess, this is a good example. A Good Person is my second Zach Braff directed film I've seen, the first being Going in Style, and I kind of want him to just make straight up comedies? I haven't seen his other films he's directed, and from what I know, they're also dramedies, but I think his instincts work better when it's just comedic. While this film has good intentions with what it's trying to do and say, it feels like it's trying to be shocking and different to stand out from the crowd, and I don't think you need to do that with this kind of story. It also felt odd to make this more of a dramedy when I think a straight up drama would have worked just fine. That's not to say this is poorly made or done. The performances from the cast, especially Florence Pugh and Morgan Freeman, are fantastic. They're what easily make and save this movie for me. For as messy as its messages and story can be, these two performances and their characters' journeys are what made me invested in sticking through this till the end. Would I recommend it? Honestly, I'm not sure, but I do know that if you watch it, you'll get another great Florence Pugh and Morgan Freeman performance to add to your collection. The best and only way to view this movie is going to a sold-out matinee showing filled with old people and you're the only young person there. Honestly, it made the movie even better for me. What sounds like a fairly standard comedy on paper honestly surprised the hell out of me by how charming and funny it was. It's by no means the best comedy of the year, but there were a lot of genuinely great jokes and gags here, and because of how charismatic the four leads were and how good their chemistry was, I honestly might make this a yearly watch every Super Bowl season. There's not that much to say with this one. Genuinely one of the biggest surprises of the year for me. This is another film that had such good potential, especially with the cast at play, that ultimately ended up being just okay. I wasn't expecting anything amazing or groundbreaking with this one, but it really disappointed me how any real potential this had was zapped away as soon as they made most of the house a CG green screen. Genuinely, I have no clue why they made a haunted mansion movie this way. The appeal of films like this is the scares and thrills feel real because we can tell they're happening in a real place. Once you make it obvious it's fake, all the intrigue and fun gets zapped right out of you. But despite that, even though I don't think the cast was utilized to their fullest potential, there's just enough here for them that it can make me say this is worth it for a watch every Halloween season if you're looking for a harmless but fun spooky movie to watch with the kids. Yes, I am in fact 1 in 10 people in the world that own Paramount Plus, and yes, I'm the one person that seems to have watched this movie. Genuinely, I heard no one talk about this movie when it came out. Granted, I don't know how big the nostalgia was for Zoe 101 to give it a sequel movie over a decade later, but I'm honestly not that mad it exists. While it aims at an older audience with more adult humor, it was honestly fun to be back with these characters again, and I was actually surprised how much effort went into this. What could have been a simple, low-effort job, you can tell the people that made this actually liked the show and wanted to do their damnedest to make a good film and what fans of the show would be happy with. It's shot well, has some fun editing, the jokes are surprisingly strong, and while the story may hit some cliches you can see coming a mile away, I had a really fun time with this one. While I don't think every childhood show needs to get rebooted in some fashion, I am happy that this one got as much effort as it did. If you're a fan of the show, then this is an easy recommendation. Now, I'll be the first to admit, I was a bit harsh in my review for The Little Mermaid. I had just been dumped and it was just a really sucky time in my life because of that. But that doesn't mean all my criticisms are gone. I still stand by when this film does new stuff and adds onto the original, it's fantastic. Hallie and Jonah are great in their roles and are infectious with their chemistry. Hallie, being the absolute angel she is with her vocals, just steals every scene she's in, even after she loses her voice. But when the film is just copying the original, that's when it really falters for me. Like every other live-action Disney remake, the copying is the worst part about it, because it just reminds you why the original worked as well as it did. Thankfully, compared to other remakes, the additions here are surprisingly plentiful and do just enough to make me actually want to go back and rewatch it again at some point. Plus, Hallie's goddamn incredible voice. Holy shit, it's amazing. Seriously, what the f happened here? This should have been the easiest film to get right, and they somehow barely get anything right. Look, I love James Mangold, he's a great director, and him making the final Indiana Jones movie that has elements similar to that of Logan, it makes perfect sense why he would be a great choice for this. And yet, that's not the film we got. While this film clearly wants to try to make an introspective story about who Indy is and really explore his character in ways that were never done before, it never found the right balance between that and making a classic Indiana Jones story. Now, let me be clear, I don't think this movie is bad, it's just okay, which is something Indiana Jones movies shouldn't be. Even films like Crystal Skull and Temple of Doom, for all their faults, still have this epicness to them that make them worth going back and revisiting. Here, there's far too much reliance on CG, green screens, and other trickery that nothing ever feels real, which means there's no real sense of stakes. I get Harrison Ford was in his late 70s making this, but there had to have been better and more clever ways to film the action than how they did here. Even the story is kind of lackluster. It's another race against person to find a specific treasure or adventure story, and this just didn't do it for me this time. I think had the treasure had more of a significance to our main characters, this could have worked, but again, it feels half-assed, so it doesn't work like it should. But despite this film's faults, what ultimately saves it for me and makes me say you should watch it isn't the cast, good humor, or fun moments. It's the batch crazy third act finale. I dare not spoil what it is, but it's so outrageous and insane that I kind of wish the entire movie revolved around it. Indiana Jones has always had crazy elements to it, but this was by far the craziest. Genuinely, it saved the movie for me and made it more than worth the watch in my opinion. This film has its ups and downs, but it's honestly nowhere near as bad as some people on this site will have you believe. And now we get to the good movies. Yes, I wasn't lying when I said there were more good films out there than you realized. Saw X, genuinely, is a good movie. Now, that being said, if you're not a fan of the Saw series or overly gory stuff, I don't think I need to tell you that you can skip out on this one. But for those that enjoy the series, and for those like me that have sadly seen the whole series, this was actually pretty good. While I'm not a fan of the overly gory stuff, I actually found myself to be really engaged with the story this time around. And while I would have preferred them continue down Spiral's path and make this more of a detective series, I think if they continue down this path, they might actually be able to redeem it. There's not much I can say other than it's a good Saw movie. I kind of forgot those existed. Now, yes, I'm not going to deny this film has some strange and very questionable choices about how it depicts other cultures and the way it tells its revenge story, and it's very understandable why one wouldn't want to watch it because of that. But despite those things, I actually ended up liking this movie. While I'm very disappointed this barely uses the Christmas setting of the movie, honestly that was my main reason for going to see it, I give John Woo and his team an immense amount of credit for completely committing to having no dialogue and telling the story as visually as they were able to. It's honestly really cool and impressive they accomplished that, and it's reason enough for me to recommend you check it out. But the biggest problem with the movie, for me, was how long it took to get to the actual revenge plot. See, something like John Wick got to its revenge stuff in a pretty quick manner of time. Here, it takes almost a goddamn hour to get to the actual main plot of the movie. So much time is spent showing us how he prepared for his revenge, when it could have been done in a very quick montage. Genuinely, I don't know why they structured it this way. It starts out strong, then drags itself fast. Then, once the killing starts, it picks right back up again. There's certainly a lot to complain about with this one, but I thought the no dialogue approach was insanely cool, and the action was a hell of a lot of fun once it actually got started. See it, don't see it, it's up to you, but I had a blast with this one. Look, the easiest way I can say whether or not this movie is for you is if you like the trailer or not. This movie is 100% its trailer, and that's all I need to say. Personally, I found this to be pretty fun and a funny time. I enjoyed the cast, a lot of the humor landed for me. It's pretty goddamn crazy, but in a fun way, if you find dogs swearing funny. Not that much to say with this one. Another video game movie from this year, and this time it's an actually good one. What could have been very easy to mess up and half-ass actually had some thought and effort put into it. Now, while I don't think it's scary, like at all, what makes this work for me is the story and Josh Hutcherson's performance. There's a good amount of thought put into the narrative, and I found myself actually pretty compelled by Hutcherson's character and his story. This film is certainly nothing groundbreaking, and it probably won't do much for non-fans of the games, but for those of us that grew up watching YouTubers scream their way through security cameras, this was more than worth the wait in my book. What the did I watch? Let me make it clear. Up until the last 10 minutes or so, I actually really liked this. The cast is fantastic, the humor and musical numbers are great and deranged, it works surprisingly well. But then, the last 10 minutes happened, and it genuinely almost ruined the movie for me. I have no idea why they made the choice they made, but it's there, I saw it, and I wish I could unsee it. Don't get me wrong, I really do like so much of this movie and what it did, but this is a great example of how a bad ending can ruin just about all the goodwill they had done leading up to that point. I don't know, you'll either love it or the ending will make you drink bleach. Either way, it's a musical you certainly won't forget anytime soon. This is one of those movies that the internet has yelled about so much over the years since I saw it that I have no idea what my own opinions are on it anymore. I know when I saw it, I really enjoyed it, but it's been so long since I saw it that I don't know what to think of it. I know I'll check it out again soon, but from what I remember, I do not think it is the storm of awfulness that so many people say it is. Seriously, the way people talk about this movie make it sound like this movie broke into their house, kicked their dog down the stairs, stole their baby, and made their wife divorce them. It feels weirdly forced. I'm not saying the film didn't have its problems, but to make it seem like the Antichrist of movies is a really strange thing. This is another movie that I feel like I'm the only person on this planet that saw it, which is a shame because I actually really liked it. Charlie Day has been one of my favorite actors and writers working today, and to see him make his own version of a Charlie Chaplin-esque movie was honestly really cool to see. Don't get me wrong, this film isn't perfect, it does have its faults, but I think the good far outweighs the bad here. So much of the humor having its stitches, the genuinely fantastic cast was utilized in ways I never expected of them, the satire of Hollywood felt nice and refreshing with the structure of the film. I really enjoyed my time with Fool's Paradise. Hopefully, someday, it'll gain a cult following, but until that day, I'll reside to being this film's only fan. A horror movie produced by Seth Rogen is certainly a sentence I never thought I'd hear, and yet here we are. Cobweb was a movie I didn't hear much about on account the studio released this clearly Halloween movie during the summer mid-strikes, so no one saw it or talked about it, but god damn they should talk about it. While this has some pacing issues and some strange decisions revolving around the characters given where this film's narrative goes, once you get to that third act and all hell breaks loose, this becomes one hell of an insane and amazing horror movie. I love when horror movies just go all in on the insanity of their stories and hold nothing back, and this one does it in strides. I'm not going to spoil what happens, but once you get to that point, you're in for one hell of a fun ride. Yes, I actually like this movie. Gran Turismo doesn't do much to reinvent the classic underdog sports movie, but what it does do well is give us some pretty goddamn great racing scenes grounded by the fantastic performances from David Harbour and Archie Madekwe. While it may be based on a true story, it does follow a lot of the same narrative beats you see in stories like this. And for a premise of a gamer becoming an actual racer, I was hoping for something a bit different than what we got. But it didn't bother me too much because of how fun the movie was. The way Neil Blomkamp shot the races using interesting and different camera work such as drone shots really helped give this film its own feel when compared to other racing movies. If it weren't for people like David Harbour giving their all, then this film wouldn't have worked half as well. It's by no means the greatest movie ever made, but I still found it to be a surprisingly fun and good time. Evil Dead Rise is one of those movies that I have so many conflicted feelings on. It's not that I think it's a bad movie, I don't. I just don't think it's a good Evil Dead movie. While the darkness and pure horror angle worked well in the 2013 remake, it just doesn't work the same here, at least to me. Evil Dead has been one of my favorite horror series for years due to the fact it never took itself that seriously. It always remembered to have fun, and the zaniness is what always made it stand out from the rest of the horror films that were released against it. But here, playing it as straight and as serious as possible honestly left me pretty disappointed. While there's certainly some great moments and the cast is giving it their all, it sadly didn't work for me the way it did for others. Again, I don't think this is a bad film, it just didn't work for me as well as I would have liked. This, like every movie released in January of this year, surprised the hell out of me. You release a movie called Plane, and you for some reason make it good? This is the title of a straight-to-DVD movie made on the budget of a ham and cheese sandwich, not an actual good movie with a lot of effort put into it. I'm not gonna act like this film does a lot to surprise you, but the tension was done surprisingly well and the action was far more gripping than I was expecting. Gerard Butler is one of those actors I keep forgetting is going to give their all in every performance, and teaming him up with Mike Colter here was a fantastic choice. Once you get to that finale, it'll make you want to stand up and cheer. If you haven't seen this yet, please do yourself a favor and check Plane out as soon as possible. Again, what was with the people calling for this movie's head last year? Shazam! Fury of the Gods may not be as good as the first movie, but that doesn't mean it's a bad movie either. I love this series and these characters, and to see them come back and have as much fun as they were made for a great time in the theater. I think there's definitely some gripes to be had when it comes to the action just being okay and the villain's motivation being wonky at best, but I still found this movie really charming. The whole cast is great, and newcomers like Rachel Zegler add a lot of heart to this movie that I wasn't expecting. If you genuinely believe this movie is somehow worse than The Flash or Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, I think you might need to leave watching movies behind. Dream Scenario is one of those movies that I feel like should be higher on this list, but I definitely need to see it again to be able to give my full thoughts on it. Nicolas Cage, like always, does a fantastic job, and I love how different this performance was compared to a lot of his more recent stuff. Seeing him play the super awkward professor suddenly thrust into worldwide fame was so fun to see him play and was easily my favorite aspect of the movie. For me though, the biggest problem of the movie wasn't the ambiguity of what was going on, it was the tone. While it starts out like a straightforward comedy, as it keeps going it feels more and more conflicted on what kind of movie it wants to be. While I was still laughing at parts, it felt like the film was having an identity crisis of how much it actually wanted to make me laugh and how much it wanted me to take what was happening seriously. While this film might not be for everyone, if you're looking for another great Nicolas Cage performance with a good amount of laughs, you can't go wrong with this one. A Haunting in Venice is one of those movies that I expected nothing from, since the last two of them in the series were so mediocre, and it ended up surprising the hell out of me of how good it was. Don't get me wrong, the mystery is just okay and not the most shocking thing in the world, but Kenneth Branagh really strapped on his director's cap with this one and went hard with it. The cinematography, the haunting atmosphere, the unease and discomfort you feel in every scene made for one of the most surprisingly atmospheric horror movies to come out this year. I don't know why this was the one he went so hard with, but I'm not complaining. Genuinely, I really liked this movie. Getting a horror murder mystery movie is such a cool concept that I'm honestly surprised it isn't done more. While you can nitpick this movie to death, the good far outweighs the bad for me. Genuinely, one of the most surprising films of the year and an easy recommendation for those looking for a murder mystery with something different. Again, January 2023 was something different, man. While this initially seemed like it'd be one of those inspirational comedies, quickly shows itself to be something much more in tune with its dramatic side than I originally thought there would be. Tom Hanks, as always, does a fantastic job here, and the rest of the cast as well does some great work too. While there are times when the tone doesn't quite balance correctly and the pacing can get a bit off, overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Is it the greatest one ever? No. Did it make me cry buckets by the end? Of course it did. Cocaine Bear. Cinema in its purest form. Look, you go to see a movie like Cocaine Bear, what the hell were you expecting? What I wanted was an over-the-top insane comedy about a bear on cocaine, and I certainly got what I paid for. I think if there's any major gripe for me is that while this may have a terrific ensemble cast, I feel like they weren't as well utilized as they could have been. It's not that any of them were wasted, I just feel like they weren't given as much as they could have been, given what the this movie is called. But at the end of the day, I genuinely love Cocaine Bear. A fantastic and fun time at the movies, and a great signal we were in store for some pretty great comedy movies in 2023. Speaking of good comedies that people didn't give much of a chance on, we have Renfield. The fact this was the better Dracula movie in 2023 still shocks me. But you give me Nicolas Cage's Dracula and a terrified Nicholas Hoult as Renfield, I should have expected this to be the better movie. Honestly, my only big gripe with this one is the stuff focusing on the mob run by Ben Schwartz. I feel like this kind of stuff could have been better implemented into the plot, and it just felt messy as the film progressed. But when compared to the great comedy and surprising amounts of action, it honestly didn't bother me that much. I love when Nicholas Hoult gets to play comedic because he is so damn funny, and his talents are utilized brilliantly here. The rest of the cast is also great, and I wish they used Nicolas Cage more because he chews up the scenery every time he's on screen, and it's delightful. One of the more underrated movies of the year, and one I would highly recommend you check out as soon as you can. You know how I mentioned earlier Illumination doesn't put much effort into their movies? Yeah, that doesn't apply here. Why the they put all their effort into the goddamn Duck movie instead of the Mario movie is beyond me, but god damn it, I genuinely had a great time with this one. Again, Migration is a good example of having a simple story with many narrative beats you're familiar with being offset by some really good comedy and fun characters. When compared to the Mario movie, this is a comedic masterpiece. Every joke feels intentional, the punchlines all land perfectly, and each character actually has some personality and life to them, so I actually enjoyed and cared about what I was watching. Migration is honestly one of the best movies Illumination has ever made, and it kind of makes me mad that it is. Don't get me wrong, I'm very happy this is good, but this proves that if Illumination wanted to, they could actually make some really genuinely good movies, instead of the cinematic equivalent of jingling keys in front of your baby. I really hope going forward they put more effort into their movies, because I love this one and I had a great time with it. It is so funny to me how the Farley brothers broke off. One went on to win multiple Oscars he didn't deserve and hasn't been able to make anything noteworthy since, and the other one made an actual good movie in Champions. 2023, truly a wild year for cinema. Champions presents an underdog sports story that, to my knowledge, hasn't really been done before, and while it may hit some cliches, it honestly kept surprising me at every turn. The cast is all fantastic, the humor is great, and it genuinely made me feel for this team and made me want to see them succeed. It's a shame this released during March, the busiest month of the year for movies. Seriously, all of these released in March and got a wide release, because this is a great sports movie and one that I hope gets more attention as the years go on. I've already talked about this movie in my review, so if you want some more in-depth thoughts, you can check that out, but like I said there, I'm really happy we finally got a good mainline Transformers movie. While I've learned to appreciate the size and spectacle Bay did with his Transformers movies, the stories and characters left a lot to be desired. So, to get a director that actually cared about the characters and wanted to tell a good story, it was a breath of fresh air. While the third act might not feel as grand and epic as previous Transformers movies, I still had a blast with this one. Even if you aren't a fan of the Transformers movies, I think you will be after this one. This is another movie that surprised me in how little attention it got when it came out, because it's a surprisingly good horror comedy. The premise of The Blackening lends itself to a lot of great laughs and satirical moments, but it was in how well the characters were written that made me really love this movie. Too often in horror movies, it's just one or two characters that get the most development and everyone else gets nothing. But to see the whole main cast be fully developed characters made me really happy. While it's not the scariest thing in the world, I think it found the right balance of spooks and comedy to make this an effective film. My only gripe is that I feel like there wasn't enough satire. I know this film was trying to walk the line so we can feel for the characters, but I think more satire would have helped this film in the long run. But at the end of the day, The Blackening surprised the hell out of me, and one film that you should definitely check out if you're a fan of some great horror comedy. Honestly, this one kind of disappointed me a bit. Not because it was poorly made, this was another well-made horror film, but what disappointed me was the commentary and satire just wasn't there with this one. Where Scream 5 had some of the best commentary since the original film, here they just didn't seem to have anything to say about things like horror movies or the entertainment industry like the previous films had. Scream's satire is what makes this series stand out from the rest of the slasher genre, and it really disappointed me the commentary was so lackluster here. Now, don't get me wrong, this is still a really good movie. I love the cast, the suspense was well done, I did have a really fun time with this. If the satire and commentary were stronger, I could easily see this being one of the best films in the series. By no means the worst Scream movie we've gotten, but definitely not the best one either. Thank God the R-rated sex comedy is back. It felt like a dying breed for so long, but to get one not only in theaters, but as good as this was, makes me incredibly happy. Jennifer Lawrence, like in everything, gives a fantastic performance, and I'm so happy she gets to show off how fantastic her comedic chops are. You can tell in every scene she's in how happy and excited she is to be here, and that energy just radiates in every scene. Not just her, but Andrew Feldman also gives a fantastic performance alongside her. The two have such good chemistry with one another, and I hope they get to work together again in the future. The only real downsides I can think of are the cliches found in stories like this, but with how good the comedy and performances are, I honestly didn't care. I had a blast with no hard feelings, and if you haven't seen it, you should check it out ASAP. While it may not be the greatest thing Marvel has ever made, it certainly isn't the dumpster fire incels will have you think it is. I love the Marvels, and if you haven't seen it yet, then I feel sorry for you. It's a blast from beginning to end, cast is an absolute delight and works so well with each other, and by the end, I wish I got to see more of them working together. If you want more in-depth thoughts, you can check out my review of it, but I genuinely love this movie, and I hope as more see it, it gets the love that it deserves. Out of all DC films this year, this one surprised me the most. Blue Beetle is easily one of the DCEU's strongest film they've made in quite some time, and a lot of that has to do with the cast, the family dynamic, and the fun action. It doesn't do much to reinvent the comic book origin wheel, but it doesn't need to. You can tell everyone that worked on this had so much love for these characters and the story that they were telling, and that love just infects you the more the film goes on. I really hope we get to see more of Jaime and his family soon, because this is one of my favorite DC films, and I hope more of you see it. This is a movie about a man that gets his gold stolen by Nazis during World War II and decides sweet, bloody revenge is the best way to get it back. I'm sorry, that's just awesome, and Nazis getting their due justice is never not going to make me smile. Only negative for me with this one was the pacing. The film can have such high highs, but it can take a while in between said highs. This isn't even that long of a film either, so it's strange why there's this big of a pacing issue here. But despite that, this film was a blast. This shit had me on the edge of my seat, and that goddamn amazing finale made me want to stand up and cheer. I love Sisu, and if you have any brains about you, you'll see this soon. Another pretty divisive film, but one I honestly loved. Gareth Edwards is one of those few blockbuster directors working today that knows and understands size and spectacle. The fact this was made for only $80 million still blows my mind. While the narrative at play is nothing new, I still found myself fully engaged and wanting to see what would happen next, even though it was pretty obvious. I can understand why this didn't work for some, but it worked well for me. The visuals are astounding, the performances are great, many tears were shed. I had a great time with this one. The film that somehow showed the world 2023 was going to be a baller year for movies is one that never should have worked to begin with. Megan is one of those horror movies where you have to know the tone you need it to be if it's going to work. If you don't go all the way with it, then it'll flop hard on its face. Thankfully, they understood the assignment and then some. This was an insanely fun time at the movies, and still one of the most surprising horror movies to come out in recent memory. But for me, what really helped make this stand out was how much it made me care about our central characters. They put in a surprising amount of work to make you feel for and understand these characters, and if they hadn't put in that work, I don't think this film would have succeeded. That, and this film is hilarious, for all the right reasons. Again, it's one of those films with a premise that's so goddamn insane and silly that you have to portray that insanity and silliness. If you play it too straight, it'll come off funny, just not as the way it's intended. But when the trailer came out and she was doing the TikTok dance, that's when I knew this film was going to work. By no means the scariest film out there, but one of the most fun horror movies I've seen in quite some time. What else is there to say about Fast X? If you're not on board this goddamn amazing, insane train of a film series, then I feel sorry for you. We got easily the best villain of the series played by Jason Momoa, and you still think you're too good for these films? I feel sorry for you. You want more of my thoughts? Then go check out my review. But you don't deserve my thoughts. Shame on you. Ugh. What number are we on? 48? Okay, cool. Alright. Anyway, Dumb Money was good. This was another film that fell under the radar due to the writers and actors strikes, and it's a shame that it did because I think this should have been a huge success. The ensemble cast is utilized really well here. It finds a great balance of the comedy and drama. It's one of the best crowd pleasers of the year. If you enjoy movies about sticking it to the billionaires that ruin our lives, you'll definitely enjoy this one. Oh boy, now this is going to have people's heads turning. Film Twitter just went off on this movie, and it makes me feel like an insane man for liking it. I'm not saying this film is flawless, it definitely has its issues, but I don't think it's a bad or even a poorly made film. I found this to be a really fun movie with some great performances, an interesting narrative, some of the best cinematography of the year. It was a hell of a fun time. And to those saying it's a movie that's shocking for the sake of shocking, or how it's about the middle class is evil and the upper class is good because this was made by someone from the upper class, I'm genuinely confused by your takes. I feel like the story and what it's trying to do was fairly straightforward and easy to grasp, and the shocking moments weren't really that shocking. Mainstream cinema has just been so deprived of stuff like that for years that to most audiences, it comes off as shocking because they're not used to seeing stuff like that these days. I thought Saltburn was a really fun time at the movies, and Emerald Fennell continues to show her capabilities as a director. Why this one got Film Twitter up in a frenzy? I honestly don't know. For me, I enjoyed it, and I hope there's others like me that also enjoyed it too. Another major surprise this year was Thanksgiving, a film I honestly was not looking forward to. The trailers didn't pull me in, the premise wasn't enough to get me excited, it just wasn't doing it for me. Then the reviews came out and were surprisingly positive. So I thought, what the hell? I could go into a bit more depth and decide to see it. And what I got was one of my favorite slashers to come out in recent memory. Like Megan, this found the perfect balance of its tones and topped it all off with glorious over-the-top kills. Had the kills not been as fun and insane as they were, or had the balance of the tones not been handled as well as it should have, this wouldn't have worked. In the end, Thanksgiving really surprised me and is now a must-watch every Thanksgiving season. Like with Zoe 102, I feel like I was the only person alive that's watched this movie, which is a damn shame because this was one of the funniest movies I saw this year. If you don't know who Please Don't Destroy are, go watch their SNL skits. They are easily the best part of the show for a while now. What I love so much about this movie is how much these guys feel like they're the next iteration of The Lonely Island. They use zany, over-the-top comedy in ways I haven't seen in quite some time, and for them to get a whole movie made to show off their talents just prove how great they are as a comedy group. While there can be some jokes that are hit and miss, overall, I was laughing my ass off and having a great time with this one. If you're a fan of Please Don't Destroy, The Lonely Island, or just good comedies, you're gonna have a blast with this one. Do you think it's possible to sue Pixar for emotional damage? Like with many of their films, Elemental is another charming, tear-inducing movie that I somehow didn't mentally prepare enough for. While I don't think I would classify this solely as a rom-com, I very much enjoyed all the romantic aspects of it. Ember and Wade are such lovable characters, and their chemistry with one another is goddamn infectious. They could have just made the movie about their romantic life, and I would have been perfectly happy with it, but it's the immigrant story at the center of this movie that surprised the hell out of me. Compared to how Disney has handled other real-life issues in the past, I feel like this one worked far better here, but I do wish there was a bit more to it. But if that's my only gripe with the film, I'll take it. Elemental, while not one of my favorite Pixar movies, is certainly another fantastic film from them, and I'm so excited to see what they come up with next. I love Nimona! The fact Disney passed on this because it was too gay for them is so stupid and insane, and now this is nominated for an Oscar and Wish isn't? How do you like that, Disney? Huh? My apologies, I got a little carried away there for a second. I just love this movie to death. Nimona is one of those movies that I am so thankful got enough attention when it came out, because this is a goddamn delight. Everything from the cast to its gorgeous animation to the amazing humor and heart that's throughout the entire film, it's very hard to not fall in love with this movie. Netflix may have a constant problem of just greenlighting stuff and never marketing it, but the fact they gave this movie a shot makes me insanely happy. This is easily one of my favorite animated movies of the year, and you're doing yourself a disservice if you haven't seen it yet. You know those movies people keep recommending to you over the years and keep saying they're really good, but you think it looks dumb so you don't listen to them? Then one day you get bored and decide to put the movie on because you have nothing better to do? Yeah, that was me with the Magic Mike series. I genuinely love these movies and think they're easily some of Channing Tatum's best work. Magic Mike XXL being one of the greatest sequels of all time was something I never expected to say, but I am so goddamn happy to report on that. So, does Magic Mike's Last Dance live up to the hype? Well, I can't exactly say it did since no one went to see it, but I saw it and I loved it! While it doesn't reach quite the same highs as the last film, I think Last Dance is a more than worthy follow-up and conclusion to the series. The way Steven Soderbergh and writer Reed Carolyn explore art, passion, and desire through these films is some of the best explorations of these themes I've seen in any movie. I'm not exaggerating, I think these films are fantastic at exploring Mike's character and what he truly wants in life, and the conclusion they come to here feels so satisfying in ways I wasn't expecting. If you think these movies are just about hot people doing hot dances, you're not wrong, but you're doing yourself a disservice if you're dismissing these films just because of what they are on the surface. Please, watch this trilogy as soon as you can. You'll thank me later. I really hate how early this released in the year, because Dave Bautista deserves Oscar buzz for his performance here. Knock at the Cabin, while not my favorite Shyamalan movie, is definitely one of the better ones he's made in recent years. This is one of those films where the premise is all that I need to get me to go see it. Then, I see Dave Bautista is starring in it, and that's when I knew we were in for something special. Bautista is one of those actors that's finally starting to get some recognition for his talents, and I am so happy Shyamalan saw this and let him give his all with this film. That's not to say everyone else is bad. The entire cast does a great job and all give some terrific performances. While I would have preferred there to have been a bit more mystery as to what was happening and some ambiguity to it, this film still had me on the edge of my seat wondering what would happen next and who would survive. No matter your thoughts on Shyamalan as a filmmaker, I highly recommend you check this one out. Rom-coms are back, bitches! God, it feels so good to see a movie like this in theaters again. Yes, this film doesn't do anything new to reinvent the rom-com formula, but this is proof that all you need for these movies to work is some great humor and two lovable and charming leads at the center, and this film has that in spades. I really loved this movie from beginning to end, so much so I saw it 3 times in theaters. It's so fun and charming, and I really hope this signals to Hollywood to start bringing movies like this back to theaters again. It's a perfect date night movie, and even if you're single, you'll find so much to love about it. While I may not be the biggest fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I certainly was a huge fan of this film. Everything from the animation style to the wonderful characters and fantastic humor made for one of the best animated movies of the year by far. I think what made this work so much more for me compared to the recent live action Turtles movies, aside from this being an actually good movie, is how much the love for the Turtles and this world is seen in every scene. This was clearly made by people that are massive fans of these characters, and they clearly wanted to do their best to not only do them justice, but put their own fun spin on it. Bringing together the talents of Seth Rogen, Evan Goldberg, and the director of The Mitchells vs. the Machines made for one hell of an amazing combination that I never would have thought of, but I am so happy it exists. Even if you're not a massive fan of the Turtles, there's more than enough here to make you fall in love with them and want to consume everything they've ever been in. You can try to defend Austin Butler's Elvis movie as much as you want, but to me, this is the vastly superior and far more interesting story than that film. And it's not just because the focus of the film is about Priscilla Presley, but because it's one of those rare biopics that actually shows what the real life people were like, not the glamorized, perfectly perfect Hollywood version these kinds of movies always tend to produce. Sofia Coppola's writing and direction is absolutely fantastic, and Kaylee Spaney and Jacob Elordi give some of the best performances of their careers in this. Unlike 2022's Elvis, this film actually kept me engaged and intrigued with its narrative because it wasn't a simple, here's the biggest life moments of these characters. Focusing the narrative around Priscilla's relationship with Elvis from when she was 14 up until his death was an incredibly fascinating story to see unfold, mostly because all the iffy and bad stuff that's almost never talked about is at the forefront here. If you haven't checked this one out yet, I highly recommend that you do, especially if you want an actual good Elvis movie. Here's something that may shock many of you. I'm not a big car person. I may enjoy films like Cars 2 and Ford vs. Ferrari, but I've never been someone that interested in the world of cars. But what I am interested in is Adam Driver doing an Italian accent and being really passionate about cars. That right there is a recipe for a great movie. Michael Mann has been a director that I'm obviously familiar with, like most film people are, but I've never actually watched any of his films up until now. And I've gotta say, this guy that I've heard is good at making movies made a pretty damn good movie. What could have been a very generic by-the-numbers biopic, Mann finds a way to really center the audience in this person's obsession with his cars and racing and how much this fractures his life. The race scenes are frenetic and full of life, energy, and clarity. While Ferrari himself doesn't do any of the racing, his ominous presence looms over every race like he's always in the passenger seat. Every performance in this film is great, especially Penelope Cruz. Her character and performance broke my heart, and it's a damn shame the Academy snubbed her this year because this was one hell of a performance. I'll need to see it again to really collect my thoughts on it, but for my introduction to Michael Mann, this was a pretty good one, and I can't wait to explore the rest of his filmography soon. It's so hard in this landscape of theaters mainly only showing blockbusters to get to see an actual comedy in theaters rather than streaming, and while this didn't get the biggest of releases, I'm very happy I got to see You Hurt My Feelings in a theater with a crowd full of people. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is undeniably a fantastic comedic actor, but I'm really happy this movie got to let her play with some more dramatic stuff than we're used to seeing. While I've seen her do dramatic stuff in the past, I think this was the first time it really clicked for me just how good of an actress she is. This isn't a drama, nor is it really a dramedy, but I think this film finds just the right balance of comedy and sheer humanity that gives its cast a pretty wide range to work with. What could have easily been a story of a relationship on the brink of collapse because of a specific thing teetering it over the edge, writer director Nicole Holofcener takes this concept and actually explores the reality that comes with it rather than over dramatize it like so many other filmmakers would. No fights feel like they're to show off how good the actors are, no argument feels unjustified. It's a very honest examination of the lies we tell in relationships because we're scared of how it'll make others in our lives feel. It honestly surprised the hell out of me, and I highly recommend you check it out once you get the chance. Yet another movie that film Twitter just loved to tear down and act like Bradley Cooper committed the greatest sin in film history. Look, I'm not saying this film is perfect and doesn't have its flaws. I think when the film is following the standard biopic formula, that's when it feels at its worst. But you cannot deny the love, craft, and passion Bradley Cooper put into every frame of this movie. He showed all of us just how good of a writer and director he could be with A Star Is Born, and here the gloves have truly come off, and he proves himself to probably be one of the best directors working today. While I'm not a fan of every narrative choice made and think some elements like exploring Bernstein's sexuality could have been explored better, the fact is, for me, this was one hell of an experience. Cooper just fires off on every cylinder and gives it his all, both as a director and on screen as well. The cinematography, is goddamn incredible, especially during the black and white sections of the film. Cooper clearly has a deep love and appreciation for classic Hollywood cinema, and it shows in every frame. But the key to the film's success and why I loved it so much is its focus on Felicia Montealegra, played by Carey Mulligan. So many of these biopic movies love to show the tortured artist, but neglect to show how their life impacts their loved ones. It's very clear from the get-go, Cooper is framing this as a love story between Leonard and Felicia, and in doing so, creates a much more impactful story than if he hadn't. Mulligan is incredible as always and brings a much needed level of almost normalcy to such a fantastically stylized film. I get if this didn't vibe with you, but I honestly really loved it, and it makes me so goddamn excited to see what Cooper has in store next as a director. This might be my favorite Hunger Games movie? Maybe? Honestly, it's really hard to pick one because they're all fantastic. But I think the narrative of this one is probably the strongest and most interesting out of all of them to me. While I never felt like I needed to learn about Snow's past, Suzanne Collins found a way to tell a story about how growing up in a totalitarian society filled with indoctrination is capable of producing someone as bad as Snow. But by making it a love story, it adds a level of humanity that makes the tragedy of where he ends up all the more impactful. Tom Blythe and Rachel Zegler are perfect in their roles, and the two have amazing chemistry with one another. Honestly, I feel like this should have been the Hunger Games movie to be split into two parts, because while the film does a pretty good job of exploring Snow's character, by the end I couldn't help but feel it got a bit rushed with certain aspects and could have benefited from being a bit longer. There's some other nitpicks in there, but overall, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was a damn good time, and I know it's controversial, but it probably is my favorite film in the series. This film really snuck up and surprised the hell out of me. Guy Ritchie has been a filmmaker I've been a fan of since I saw his 2009 Sherlock Holmes movie, but lately, with films like Aladdin, The Gentleman, and Operation Fortune, I've been worried that he doesn't have it anymore. Then, in the same year Operation Fortune came out, he released The Covenant, one of the best war movies I've ever seen. It's so weird how this movie just kind of came out and no one really talked about it because it's really good. It may not have the stylized action and flair that's known to be in his films, but he makes up for it by having an insanely compelling and interesting story that goes places I honestly didn't expect. Jake Gyllenhaal and Darcy Lim give some fantastic performances, and what easily could have been a very white savior kind of movie flips it around and becomes a film criticizing the American military system and how it basically abandoned the translators that worked for them once they were pulled out of Afghanistan. Most war movies fall into the realm of propaganda, recounting events during certain wars, or focusing on PTSD and the effects of war. So to see a film actively go after and criticize how the American military treats people like translators and leaving them behind in conditions where they know they could die is honestly a breath of fresh air. Surprisingly intense and heart-racing. Even if you're not a fan of Guy Ritchie's films or military films in general, I think you should check this one out. Theater Camp was a goddamn delight. I grew up as a theater kid myself and did a lot of theater stuff in my youth, and watching this brought back so many memories for me. Not only that, but this film is hilarious. Even if you weren't a theater kid, this film will make you laugh your ass off at every chance it gets. Everything from the amazing characters, performances, sharp writing, and fantastic direction make this one of my favorite comedies of the year. Probably my biggest gripe with the movie is it's apparently a mockumentary. I say this as a question because there's barely anything that really calls on for this to be made as a mockumentary. If you cut out the bits of text in the beginning and end of the movie that describe certain events, then nothing changes. There's no interviews, no narration of any kind. To me, it feels like it was a last-minute decision to make it a mockumentary. I'm not saying this as a big gripe or criticism, it's just confusing to me. I think, either way, this story works fine. It just perplexes me is all. That being said, this film is fantastic. I loved everything about it. Please watch it with others. You will have a ball. Oh boy, I'm gonna get so much hate for putting this film this low on this list. Now, look, before you crucify me, I think this film is very good and is very well made. But as this list keeps climbing, it became a very big challenge on how to rank everything. And once you get to films that are all very well made, it becomes damn near impossible to rank stuff. At this point in the rankings, it's all a matter of personal preference, like I said in the beginning. So I'm sorry this film isn't higher, it's just how I feel. Now, I'm very happy to report I actually have a film made by Yorgos Lanthimos that I actually liked and enjoyed. I am not a fan of The Lobster, it just flat out didn't work for me. I didn't care for The Favorite when it came out, but granted that was 5 years ago, so maybe my opinion on it has changed. So, when this film was announced and the trailer released, I was very worried I wasn't going to like it, and thank God I actually enjoyed it. Here, compared to his other films I've seen, it seems that Yorgos finally found a script that really works with the kind of humor that he's been doing for his last few films. It's like a mix of deadpan with dry while also being straightforward with some absurdism thrown in as well. I know it's weird to try to describe the way humor works in people's style of it, but with the nature of the story and characters, they perfectly lend themselves to this very specific kind of humor that he's been doing for a while. Every performance is fantastic, particularly Emma Stone and Mark Ruffalo. Everything on a technical level is absolutely incredible, from the set design to the costumes and makeup to the wonderful effects and cinematography. It's an absolute gorgeous piece of art. My only real gripes with the film are certain cinematography choices Yorgos makes in this. He really likes to use wide angle and fisheye lenses, and here he just kind of does them at random. Typically, with how those lenses warp the image, you want to use them in very specific instances, and he uses them all the goddamn time here. It really doesn't make sense to me and always took me out of it when he used them. There's also a narrative choice that happens around like the final 20 minutes in the movie that just stops it dead in its tracks and really took me out of it. I get why it's there and the purpose it serves thematically, but I feel like those themes were already explored earlier in the film, so it feels like we're backtracking and doing things again when we were about to have a perfect ending. If you've seen the film, then you probably know what I'm talking about. It's not that it was badly done, it's just not where it should have been in this movie to me. I'm really happy I liked Poor Things, and I'm very happy a movie as weird and crazy as this is getting the recognition it deserves at the Oscars this year. Yet another victim of an amazing movie stuck on streaming because studios are too chicken shit to take a risk on something original and different. You may think that's too specific, but I promise you it's not. Yeah, No One Will Save You just kind of came out of nowhere and surprised anyone that watched it. To have a home invasion movie not only be told with no dialogue whatsoever, but have it be an alien home invasion is such a fun and cool concept, and I am so happy it paid off here. Caitlin Dever, like in everything, is goddamn incredible, and this is a perfect showcase of her talents because she has to deliver so much information about the story, what's happening, and who her character is just through her emotions and reactions. If there's any reason to see this movie, it's to see her incredible performance. But something else that surprised me is just how suspenseful this film was. The home invasion sequences are very well staged, and the aliens, while looking generic at first, just have this truly foreboding presence about them. Not just that, but the mystery of what exactly is going on really helps build on and add to the suspense in ways I couldn't see coming. It's a damn shame this got stuck on streaming because this was a hell of a fun time, and I hope more and more people check it out as soon as they can. While Chapter 2 is probably still my favorite in the series, this is a pretty damn good swan song to go out on. If you aren't into the John Wick series at this point, then I just feel sorry for you. Truly some of the best action movies ever made, and this film is a fantastic example as to why. While it may be a bit too long at times and some fight scenes can overstay their welcome, this was one of the most thrilling and fun times I had at the movies last year. Yeah, not a whole lot to say on this one, just really loved it and had a fun time with it. Sue me. Please don't. I'm in so much student debt, it's not even funny. Talk about another film that's insanely good but getting no recognition this award season. Netflix, like always, just completely dropped the ball when it came to marketing this film, and I really don't understand why. They Clone Tyrone is an insanely fun time at the movies. Ironic, given this didn't really have a theatrical release, but my point still stands. John Boyega, Teyonah Parris, and Jamie Foxx are such a fantastic combination of actors, and I really hope they all work together again someday because they were an absolute blast to watch together. The way this film balances its comedy and sci-fi story with commentary about the government and corporations' treatments of black people in this country really surprised the hell out of me. This movie throws some great curveballs at you and really kept me on my toes until the very end. Writer-director Jewel Taylor made one hell of a feature film debut, and I am so excited to see what he has in store next. Even though this may not be higher on the list, I am still pissed off how A24 didn't give us a bigger Oscar push. The Iron Claw is one of the most heartbreaking and tragic films I've seen in quite some time. It's very hard to make a movie that's so rooted in tragedy without it coming off as Oscar bait, but writer-director Sean Durkin never feels like he's going, look at how good of a director I am. Every choice, every moment, every heartbreaking scene feels earned, and none of it would work as well if it wasn't for its stellar cast, led by a career-best performance from Zac Efron. While it didn't make me cry as much as it did for others, by the end, I was a weeping and blubbering mess and understood people's angers about how this got snubbed this award season. If you haven't seen this one yet, get some tissues ready because this one will break your heart. This is a movie that I've gone back and forth on so much since I saw it in theaters. Not because it's bad by any means, far from it. For me, this is one of Wes Anderson's most fascinating and interesting films when it comes to the themes permeating throughout it and the way he explores the characters and their struggles. I think at this point there's no reason to talk about Wes Anderson's style because it's perfect and utilized brilliantly here, but I found this to have a really interesting narrative structure compared to his other films. By making the main story of Asteroid City a play in the universe of the film, Anderson is really able to get more creative and abstract when it comes to exploring the themes and ideas of the movie. That's not to say his previous films don't have their own realm of theatricality to them, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about his intention and choices when it came to forming the narrative in this manner. I honestly need to go back and watch it about 50 times, not just so I can understand it on a deeper level, but because it's just hilarious and the cast is absolutely fantastic here. Even if you're not a fan of Wes's style of filmmaking, this is still one you should definitely check out if you haven't had a chance yet. Glenn Howerton, I will avenge you not getting an Oscar nomination for this movie. Mark my words. I think it kind of does a disservice to this movie for having so many people compare it to films like The Social Network, and I can see why those kind of comparisons are made. But what co-writer/director Matt Johnson did with this movie is finding the perfect balance of comedy with drama and perfectly encapsulating it in its two lead performances from Glenn Howerton and Jay Baruchel. Both are at the top of their game here, and it's very clear why they were both picked for their parts. While on the surface it initially appears they're playing roles similar to what we're familiar with, Johnson uses this to his advantage to not only deliver the comedy in a brilliant manner, but to pull the rug out from under us when the shit starts hitting the fan. They both go to places I wasn't expecting, and it really surprised the hell out of me. While some narrative beats it hits are familiar with this type of story, they're all in service to make the story as fun as it is and be a vehicle to show how great its leads are. The fact Paramount released this not only at the end of the busiest month of the year at the movies, but mere days before the Super Mario movie, they were just asking for this movie to fail. Which makes no goddamn sense because this movie is amazing! So few fantasy movies released today have any sense of fun, with most being drab and depressing, mostly filmed on green screen with only a sense of realism to them, and it makes me sad that we keep moving further and further from fantasy films with some goddamn life to them. So for this film to come along and not only have some sense of style and fun, but some life to it, makes me so happy. While I've never played a game of D&D before and aren't familiar with the world and characters that inhabit it, the fact of the matter remains that this movie is some of the most fun I had in theaters last year. The cast is pitch perfect, the jokes are amazing, the world is so interesting and full of life, I never wanted the film to end. Sadly, this movie didn't do amazing at the box office, so it's still up in the air if this will get a sequel or not. Please do yourself a favor and check this movie out ASAP. We need this to get a sequel, and I'll never forgive you if we don't. Yes, you specifically. See, I know this isn't a comedy, but there's so many amazing line deliveries and humorous moments that I almost want to classify it as one. If you've seen The Killer, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Compared to previous Fincher films, this probably has one of the most non-traditional narratives he's done, but I found that to make for a really interesting experience. This could have so easily just been a traditional revenge story, but Fincher clearly doesn't want to make that kind of film, so instead he tells a story about a man that had one bad day at work and now has to work overtime to fix his mistake, and he's really not happy about it. You may think I'm making that up, but it's honestly the truth and it's amazing because of it. Fassbender gives another fantastic performance, and his plethora of internal monologues just make for a wonderful experience. Something that really surprised me with this was how incredible the sound design of this film was. Usually films like this aren't known for the most in-your-face sound design, but it is very much in your face here, and I'm honestly happy about that. I got to see this in a theater, which definitely added to the experience, but even so, The Killer is some of the most fun I've had with a David Fincher movie in quite some time, and I can't wait to check it out again. That cinema is a truly wonderful and beautiful sight to behold. Ford vs. Ferrari, Moneyball, and now Air. Movies about dudes that are really passionate about their line of work, and even though it may not be the most glamorous life, through some inspirational speeches and killer hairstyles, you too will fall in love with capitalism. All jokes aside, while Air might not be Ben Affleck's flashiest movie as a director, you can see how much fun he and every member of his cast is having in every scene in the film. I may know all about shoes and the Michael Jordan era of basketball, but god damn it, I was locked in for every single moment of this movie. The script is so sharp and funny, and Matt Damon gives such a fun and passionate performance. Ben Affleck has a wild hairdo and almost never wears shoes, truly a craftsman working at his finest. I'm so happy Amazon put this in theaters because getting to witness this film with others was an absolute delight. If you haven't fallen in love with capitalism yet, then boy do I have the film for you. Talk about getting confirmation that middle school was, in fact, the worst and most stressful time to be a kid. Kelly Fremon Craig perfectly captures the joys, fears, and innocence of youth in ways very few filmmakers are capable of doing without coming off as corny and insincere. While this film takes place in the 70s, the struggles of Margaret are honestly kind of timeless and really help lend this film to feeling just as relevant today as it was back when the book originally came out. Everyone in the cast is incredible, with Rachel McAdams reminding everyone why she's an Oscar-nominated actress in the first place. Honestly, my only real gripe is wondering why the hell this got a PG-13 rating. Is it because they talk about periods? Something every woman gets? The rating system never ceases to truly baffle me at every turn. Easily one of the year's best, and one that is very much worth every second of your time. At first, I didn't know how to feel about this film. I really enjoyed it and had a great time with it, but the ending threw me for a loop that I wasn't expecting and that I thought at first kind of ruined the movie. Now, upon rewatch, I realized that I was just an idiot and overthinking it all way too much. Sometimes the stupidity of me sneaks up on me in ways I wasn't expecting. Jeffrey Wright is, as he is in everything, goddamn amazing. So often I've only seen him really do dramatic work, so to see him in a far more comedic film was such a great breath of fresh air. His deliveries and comedic timing are some of my favorites in any comedic film this year, and I really hope he does more comedic work in the future. The rest of the cast is also amazing, and I am very happy that this film got Sterling K. Brown his first of hopefully many Oscar nominations. I will say, the more I think on it, the more I'm happy the marketing for this movie hid the film's true intentions. While you get the story you were promised in the trailers, it's more so kind of off in the background, and the real key to the film's success lies in the surprising dramatic side and deeper themes that all click by the end of the film. I don't want to give any of it away, but this film really surprised me, and I'm very excited for what writer-director Cord Jefferson has in store next. Finally, we get to the really good from 2023. If it hasn't become apparent by now, I am a sucker for a really good comedy. It's been a well-known fact that comedies just do not come out to theaters as often as they should anymore, and that pisses me off to no end. So, to get a film like Joyride in theaters and for it to be as amazingly funny as it was, made me incredibly happy. I was rolling in my seat at just about every joke that was made, and by the end wished the film hadn't ended. To me, this is easily one of the funniest films of the year. But, like a lot of great comedies, it's a surprising amount of heart and good character work that's done that really helped me fall in love with the film. Each of its 4 leads are cast and performed perfectly, and I really hope the 4 of them get to work together again in the future. Every scene was comedic gold, and even the surprising emotional moments got the better of me. It might follow beats and tropes that you know how they'll be resolved, but that doesn't matter here. The characters are fantastic, the comedy is some of the best of the year, Joyride is a goddamn delight, and one of my favorites. Never ever doubt the director of Paddington 2 again, Internet. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Yeah, it's no surprise that I love Wonka given my love for the Paddington movies. Like those films, Paul King breathes in so much charm, love, life, and humor into this film that it completely infects you and never wants to let you go. Timothée Chalamet is fantastic as Wonka, and the rest of the supporting cast is as good as a Paul King movie can be, which is to say pitch perfect and incredible. While I wish there were more songs to really make this a truly bombastic musical, I still had a hell of an amazing time with this one. This is probably my favorite Willy Wonka movie, and I'll take 10 more of them if Paul King is the one making them. I didn't think it was possible to be as good and to even top Searching, but I think Missing just might have. While it could have been very easy for this format to get old and stale quickly, this film makes up for it by not only having a really intriguing mystery, but by also going above and beyond when it came to the editing of the film. There's a lot of limitations when it comes to the cinematography of a movie like this, so the editing really has to pick it up for the movie to stay lively, energetic, and visually interesting. Every montage, scene of deducing clues, and even emotional moments feels incredibly engaging and interesting, making it easy to not only digest the information given, but to also help us feel what the main character is going through even better. I loved every second of this movie, and you will too if you haven't seen it already. What a hell of a directorial debut to make. Like, how dare you make your first film as a director be this good, Michael B. Jordan? While the Rocky series may be an incredible staple and landmark in the history of film, I've always gravitated more towards the Creed series than I have the Rocky series. That's not to say the Rocky series is bad, I love it, but I think the Creed series is far more consistent in quality and creating engaging stories than the original series is. Personally, I think Creed 2 is the best in the series, but Creed 3 is a very close second to me. Michael B. Jordan really just came out swinging, pun very much intended, as a director and gave 110% here, and it paid off big time. The fight scenes are incredible, the emotional moments are some of the best in the series, and despite everything with Jonathan Majors, we get the best antagonist of the series. He really nailed it as a director with this film. While there can be a few nitpicks I have with some narrative choices, they're all small and insignificant to everything else this film does right. This may not be my favorite film in the Creed series, but that doesn't mean it's anything but incredible. Talk about a hell of an amazing horror movie. Horror has always been a genre that I've enjoyed, but I can be more critical of when it comes to the genre's reliance on tropes and cliches. I know there's what so many people love about the genre, but I've always been someone that loves it when a horror movie gives me something new and doesn't rely on cheap tactics to scare the audience. And boy, does Talk to Me give us some of the best scares and creepy moments I've seen in quite some time in a horror movie. Danny and Michael Philippou nail the atmosphere so goddamn well here that by the end I was incredibly unsettled, and that's a very hard thing for a horror film to do in this day and age. The performances from the entire cast was great, but it's Sophie Wilde that truly shines in one of the best performances I've seen in a horror movie in years. Without her, this film wouldn't work half as well as it does. This film should be talked about in the same vein as films like Hereditary are, because it's that good. Creepy as hell, amazing performances. This film hasn't left my brain since and probably won't leave it anytime soon. The reason this film isn't higher on the list is mainly because it's one of the few films I never want to watch again, and that's an incredibly piece of high praise from me. The subject matter and horrifying timeliness of it already making it an unsettling watch, but Jonathan Glazer's brilliant and subtle direction almost makes you sick to your stomach while watching it. You never see anything horrific, but it's the complicity of the characters and their belief they're doing nothing wrong and living their life as normal that makes this film so sickening. This is not an easy film to watch, and I can understand why there are those that don't like it or don't want to watch it. But given what's happening right now to Palestine and its people, it should be required viewing. The world said never again, and yet it's happening again. Those final minutes will stick with me forever, as it should for everyone that sees it. Free Palestine. Courtroom dramas. The people yearn for them film studios, make it happen. I really love this movie. It's been too damn long since I've seen a courtroom drama that's grabbed me as well as this one had. Justine Triet crafts such a fascinating narrative and case study of our main character, played brilliantly by Sandra Hüller, that I want to go back again and again to dissect it on a further level every time. By creating a court case with practically no evidence, so it's all about judging the main character to see if she's capable of committing such an act, is an incredibly interesting concept, and I'm surprised more filmmakers haven't attempted that before. The pacing is absolutely brilliant, the themes are incredibly fascinating, the performances are some of the best of the year. I will never forgive you, Academy, for snubbing Milo Mikado Granner, who gave one of the best child performances I've ever seen in a film. This movie deserves all of its praises and then some. This film gets better and better with each viewing, and I can't wait to see it again. Sadly, I've never seen the original version of this, but even still, this is easily one of the best films of the year. Given the depressing nature of this narrative, it seems like it'd be a challenge to make this into a musical that can balance the fun, lighthearted energy and far more dramatic and emotional musical moments, but director Blitz Bazawule makes it look like it's nothing. Every performance in this film is goddamn incredible, especially from Fantasia Barrino, Taraji P. Henson, and Danielle Brooks. This film deserved far more recognition at the Oscars, especially for its performances. The musical numbers are some of the best I've seen in quite some time. Every song has so much life to it, and Blitz brings so much artistry and musicality to each number that it puts most other filmmakers of movie musicals to shame. I have to say, while narrative can be a lot at times and can be more depressing than I was expecting, it all works brilliantly for those moments of hope and catharsis we get as the film goes on. By the end, I was a weeping mess because of not only Fantasia's amazing performance, but because all the joyful emotions were more than earned and deserved. It's a shame Warner Brothers didn't push this more, because this is one of the best musicals I've seen in years, and I can't wait to see it again. This may not have emotionally destroyed me like it did so many others, but that doesn't mean this isn't one of the most subtly heartbreaking movies of the year. Celine's song brilliantly taps into what so many of us have experienced when it comes to love, and what so many of us fear as well. Very few romance films are able to maturely tell a story like this and not have it fall into traps and cliches that are synonymous with the genre. So thank God Celine said, "F your tropes, I'm here to break hearts, not mend them." Greta Lee is goddamn incredible in this, as well as Teo Yu and John Magaro. I could watch these characters go about their lives for days on end because that's how well written and performed they are. When you get to those last few minutes, you're not seeing the characters, you're seeing yourself, because we've all been in this kind of situation before. It may be a heartbreaking film, but it's also a weirdly cathartic one as well, in more ways than one. Truly one of the best films of the year, and the Academy will rue the day they didn't nominate this film more than they did. Oh, thank God we're almost done. Here's where it was really hard to rank so many of the final choices. I know a lot of these next ones and where they fall will probably piss a lot of you off, but I don't care. This is my channel, and I can do whatever the hell I want. So, this may not be the best Guardians film, that title rightfully belongs to Volume 2, but god damn it, what a hell of an ending this film was for these characters. James Gunn solidifies himself as one of the best filmmakers Marvel has ever worked with, and for this to be his farewell from Marvel is practically perfect in just about every way. We've grown with these characters for years, and even with some events happening that Gunn couldn't foresee in the MCU, he still finds a way to grow these characters in ways I never expected. By the end, I was crying like no other film had made me this year, and immediately made me want to see it again. Everything on a technical level is astounding, from the set, makeup, and costume design to the brilliant effects and action sequences. Gunn was firing off on all cylinders with this one, and it paid off big time. I could gush for days about what I love about how he explored each of these characters and their arcs that they go on here, but I would be here all day if I did. Truly one of the best films Marvel has ever made, and I'm very happy Gunn got to see his vision all the way through to the end. Holy sh**. This is, without a doubt, the best monster movie I've ever seen in my life. Godzilla Minus One has been talked about non-stop since its release, and for a damn good reason. Not only are the effects and monster sequences some of the best ever put on screen, but it's the story and characters at the root of it that make this truly as incredible as it is. Monster movies are usually not known for having any kind of deep or complex narrative with interesting characters, so for this movie to have just some of the best characters and story of any film this year truly surprised me to no end. I don't want to get into it too much because I think this movie is best experienced as blind as possible. The movie is more than worth your time, and you will not be disappointed. I guarantee you that. While I still need to see a majority of Studio Ghibli's work, I can safely say this is one of the greatest pieces of art I have ever seen. It kind of goes without saying that Hayao Miyazaki is an absolute genius, and this film is no exception to his talents. The amount of layers, themes, and ideas this film presents are almost impossible to digest on just one viewing. Hell, I still barely understand the film, and I've seen it 3 times already. But despite the more abstract and obtuse nature of the story, you're still invested sheerly by the wonder and magic of experiencing this world just like our main character is. I know there are those that say this should be higher on the list, and you're probably right. But this is easily one of the best films of the year, and one of the greatest animated films of all time. If we're talking about best films of the year, no list would be complete without one of the best comedies of the decade so far. What more can be said about Bombs that hasn't already been said? Director Emma Seligman and co-writer/star Rachel Sennett crafted one of the best and most absurd teen comedies to grace the big screen since... honestly, I don't even know what else this can be compared to. Everything from the premise to the wonderfully deranged characters and fight scenes made for one of the greatest cinematic experiences I've had in years. I was laughing my ass off at every turn and immediately wanted to see it again once the movie ended. This cast is pitch perfect, the direction incredible, the script is one of the best and funniest of the year. What else can I say except for go watch it? Paul Giamatti, if there's any justice in this world, you will be Cillian Murphy for that Oscar simply due to your eye work in this film. That is some king level shit right there. This film was a goddamn treasure to experience. I don't know if I'd necessarily classify this as a dramedy, but every comedic moment is balanced perfectly by its incredible characters, led by some of the best performances of the year. I loved every single second of this movie and wished I got to experience these characters even more than I had. Paul Giamatti, Divine Joy Randolph, and Dominic Sessa give some of the best performances not only of the year, but of their careers, which is saying a lot for Dominic since this was his first movie, which is simply incredible. Finding that sweet balance of comedy drenched in the humanity of its characters led to not only some of the best comedy of the year, but some of the best earned emotional moments as well. I'll be watching this movie every Christmas season and sending letters to the Academy begging them to give Dominic his honorary Oscar. Look, at this point, it's ridiculous to consider Scorsese as anything other than a master of cinema. Despite its almost 3.5-hour runtime, Scorsese uses every second of it to brilliantly enrich us in the world of the Osage and dive deeper into the scum that is DiCaprio and De Niro's characters. Every performance from DiCaprio to Lily Gladstone are some of the best not only of the year, but potentially of their careers as well. So many of the cast are playing against type, and that really adds to the brilliance of the story. It would have been so easy for any other filmmaker to portray DiCaprio's character with sympathy, but Scorsese at every turn is filled with disgust and hate, and by the end you see him for the lowlife that he is. His character may see himself as a sympathetic case, but everyone else can see him for what he truly is. Lily Gladstone just steals the show in every single scene that she's in. There's a reason people have been praising her nonstop for the work she's done here, and I truly hope she wins the Oscar come time for the awards. God, I hope this video comes out before then. Giving us some of the most heartbreaking moments of the year, she truly is the life and soul of this movie, and none of it would have worked without her. If you're still someone that's mad at Scorsese because of his Marvel comments and think he doesn't know what he's talking about when it comes to movies, I'm sorry, but this is the clearest example he knows exactly what he's talking about. I hope to God this man creates a multitude of films for however long he's on this earth for, because there truly is no one else like him, and it'll be a travesty when we can no longer have films from him. Is this the best Mission Impossible movie? Honestly, it's hard to say. Christopher McQuarrie and Tom Cruise are just at the top of their game when it comes to these films, and they've crafted yet another incredible film that shocked, delighted, and thrilled me to no end. It may only be part 1, but that doesn't mean you're left with an unfulfilled experience by the end. Having the clearest threat of any of the films, McQuarrie and Cruise tap into real-life fears that I don't think any of us were expecting from this series. This leads to some of the best and highest stakes of the series and leaves the door open for so many interesting possibilities for the conclusion to this story that I am so excited to see explored. The entire cast is amazing, especially newcomers like Haley Atwell and Palm Clementif, who both steal the show every time they're on screen. What easily could have become an overcrowded mess, McQuarrie avoids by using each character as much as they're needed without overutilizing any of them. I loved every performance and character in this movie, and I am so excited to see what's in store next for them. The stunts, of course, are goddamn incredible, and I think given the stakes of this story, they add a greater level of danger and fear to them than previous stunts had in the series. If you're not on board this crazy train of Tom Cruise loving movies so much he's willing to risk his life for them, then I just feel sorry for you. Christopher Nolan, once again, proves he's better at this shit than most other people working today. At this point in his career, you can tell he is so confident in his craft and what he's capable of as a writer and director that he was able to make a 3-hour movie about people talking in rooms, one of the most thrilling movies not just of the year, but of his entire career. I know this film has been talked about to death since it released, but there's a very good reason it has. While I think Interstellar is probably still my favorite movie of his, I find myself falling in love with this movie more and more every single time I watch it. Everything from its brilliant performances to the goddamn beautiful cinematography, sound design, editing, and writing delivers an experience unlike anything else this year. While people have criticized Nolan for doing non-linear structures for his narratives in the past, here, I think it helped him more than most would have realized. Biopics like this tend to follow a very rigid and straightforward structure, often not deviating from the timeline of the film too much. But the way Nolan finds narrative and thematic threads through Oppenheimer's life, and how he so brilliantly and beautifully weaves them together, should and will be studied for years to come. While you can make the very good and real case for a film like Killers of the Flower Moon to win the editing Oscar, but the way Oppenheimer almost never slows down through its edits and how it blends scenes and low moments together so beautifully is a goddamn work of art. Look, most people can agree this is a very well-made movie, but I think this is truly one of Nolan's greatest works as a director. Had he made this 10 years ago, I don't doubt it'd be good, but it wouldn't be what it is today. Nolan has yet to miss the mark as a filmmaker for me, and I am incredibly excited to see what he has in store next. My most watched movie of 2023, Barbie. While Little Women is my favorite film by Greta Gerwig and probably her best work if we're being honest, Barbie just hit all the right notes for me in ways I never would have expected. Like Oppenheimer, this film has had its praises sung like no other, and probably a lot of people are sick of talking about and listening to others talk about it. But I never got my chance to talk about it this summer, so now it's my turn, bitches! Gerwig, being the masterful filmmaker she is, created one of the great modern masterpieces of comedy that so brilliantly incorporates and explores themes about the patriarchy, womanhood, and the woes of being a Ken. No other film this year had me rolling in my seat quite like this one did, and that's due to not only its brilliant script and direction, but due to its amazing cast, with Ryan Gosling giving probably the best performance of his entire career. Gosling has been one of those actors that has shown multiple times how amazing he is comedically, and it feels like very few filmmakers ever took notice of them. So, for Gerwig to just let him loose completely and show the world he's one of the all-time great comedic actors brought me immense joy like you wouldn't believe. But you can't have a Barbie movie without its titular lead, portrayed fantastically by Margot Robbie. While Babylon is probably still my favorite performance of hers, like Gosling here, this film shows not only how great she is comedically, but reminds those that have forgotten just how amazing of an actor she is. If this film didn't star the two of them, I truly believe this wouldn't have worked half as well as it does. Everything from the Golden Age MGM soundstage designs to the wonderful costumes, brilliant performances from its supporting cast, to the really surprising themes and ideas this film explores, Barbie was so damn close to being my favorite movie of the year. Gerwig is a filmmaker like no other working today, and every studio should just let her do what she wants for the rest of time. But my number one pick had no chance of being beaten out by anything, and for some pretty damn good reasons. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is truly a miracle of a film. So rare is it for one film to truly encapsulate what makes the art of movies and filmmaking so magical, but this film succeeds in showing it and then some. I know I've already made a review discussing my initial thoughts on the film, but this film deserves to be talked about until the end of time. I don't think I've ever sat so in awe at a movie, almost ever in my life. If the movie just went frame by frame to show me the gorgeous pieces of art littering every single second of the film, I wouldn't even be mad. While the first film was incredible with its art direction, here they step it up to another level, and while there's most definitely a discussion to be had about the way Sony and the producers of this film treated its artists during the production of it, every single artist should be proud of what they accomplished with this film. I feel like so much of the conversation around this movie revolves around its art direction, rightfully so, but this is truly one of the best written comic book movies probably ever. Every narrative beat, character arc, joke, emotional moment, all brilliantly tied together, and even though the film ends on a cliffhanger and not every thread is resolved, what it does resolve feels so earned and left me incredibly satisfied. Miles' journey, Gwen's journey, the action, the story, the amazing humor, the heart, the art, it all culminates in truly not only one of the greatest comic book movies ever, but one of the greatest animated films of all time. There really is no other film like it. No other film of 2023 affected me the way this one did. There was no clearer choice for my favorite movie of 2023. If there's any film I'd point to as to why I love movies and what they're capable of, it's this one. Okay! So that was my insanely long ranking of every single movie. Was it worth it to do all this? Who's to say? But getting the chance to talk about so many of the movies I never got the chance to make a video on last year because of the strikes and other life reasons makes me really happy. To those of you that stuck through all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. I may just be an idiot nerd and probably don't know what I'm talking about half the time, but getting the opportunity to rant and talk about movies I love will always be something I'll cherish. Whether this video gets 10 views or somehow 10,000 views, it's worth it to me to put in this stupid amount of effort. Thank you all so much for watching. Please make sure to subscribe and check out the other videos I've made. Also, make sure to check out my podcast Geek Speak, where me and my friend Sean get to be idiots talking about movies and all sorts of other stuff. Make sure to be on the lookout for more fun videos in the future, and I'll see you all next time.